Welcome back to Coda Loves Comic Books. For this episode, I want to take a look at Monstress. This is a book. It's published by Image Comics. It is written by Marjorie Liu with art by Sana Takeda. This book has been on my mind recently because in single issues, issue number 30 came out fairly recently. There's a little bit of a break. There's going to be two issues called Taka Tales that are bridged between the last arc and the next arc, and then issue number 31 is going to come out here very shortly and kick off a new arc with this story. So as there's been a break and it's about ready to fire up again, it's kind of been on my mind a little bit. But it is also one of my favorite comics of all time, and I definitely wanted to take a minute and just make a video about it, just in case you are not familiar with this book or you've been curious about this book but you haven't checked it out yet. It is absolutely worth digging into. Yeah, it is awesome. So where I first heard about this book, well, let's see, I guess to start, the first issue came out December of 2015, and where I first kind of heard about it was the next year, 2016. It came up a few times in some of the episodes of Talking Comic Books podcast, but what really brought it to my attention and made me decide, okay, I need to sit down and check this out, was at the end of that year, they do their year-end awards show, and Monstress won, or they basically rated Monstress as the best comic that had come out that year. And I'd heard, again, a little bit of tidbits about it, but hearing them talk about it for that last episode, that's what convinced me, all right, I need to check this book out. And so I went down and picked up the first two trades, which you see here. And basically I've been reading it in the single issues ever since. It is such an amazing book. It is worth mentioning that it was nominated for various awards early on, for Eisners, Hugos, and that sort of thing. But in 2018, Monstress basically swept the Eisners that it was nominated for. Sana Takeda won for Best Artist and Best Cover Art, or Cover Artist. And Marjorie Liu won for Best Writer, and there's a few other awards that Monstress won as well. What's really significant about that, though, is that Marjorie Liu was the first woman in the roughly 30-year history of the Eisners to win the Best Writer award, which is 100% deserved on her part. Definitely interesting that it took 30 years for a woman to get that kind of recognition, but again, 100% deserving on her part. And in both of those cases, it just shows, I think it reflects the quality of storytelling and artwork that go into this book, and it's gone into every issue. Like just from a surface level, the artwork is stunning. Sana Takeda is probably one of my top 5, if not my top 3 comic book artists of all time. You look at any of the covers of these books, and there's just some amazing detail, and the look of them is very striking. And then you open them up and you flip through them, and all of the detail and precision and everything you see on the covers is what you see on every frame of every page. They are incredibly dense, incredibly gorgeous books. It's one of those books where just the artwork alone would be justification enough to pick it up. But what makes this comic so good is that the story is every bit as good as the artwork. It is a perfect marriage in the work that both Sana Takeda and Marjorie Liu are doing. In terms of story, I will say, I think this book is kind of rated as teen or mature, and I think that's fair. It's definitely probably like a 15 and up kind of recommended audience for this book. There's some serious issues that are tackled, some serious topics that are tackled in this book, and there's definitely some mild horror elements that come up. There's monsters, and maybe I guess kaiju, kind of like big scary monsters, is fair. Again, there's definitely kind of a horror element that comes up from time to time. So it's definitely for a teen or beyond audience. So that's just something worth keeping in mind. But any of those topics or subjects that come up that are kind of delicate. They're handled with such care, and the way that Marjorie Liu explores these characters and that Sana Takeda depicts these characters is always done with very high degree of care, and it's done very well and very thoughtfully. Um, as far as the story goes, this is, I mean, it. The story is set basically in the early 1900s, kind of like Asian-like continent. I mean, it is its own world. But the world is just coming out of a very large world war. And you can see signs of that in the people and in the places of the story as it begins. And I mean, there's some, I guess, steampunk elements to it. I've seen that. To me, I really feel like there's kind of elements of some of like Clive Barker stories, where you have kind of these, like, it's a high fantasy, but with some like undertones of horror rolled into it, and obviously monsters and that sort of thing. I'm thinking here of a Magica, maybe Cabal. Just so there's just something else, some undercurrent that's going on. But it's very fascinating for sure. And there's a lot of different peoples in this story. There are humans, of course, but there are ancients. Ancients are kind of humanoid animals. I guess could be any kind of animal like fox or wolf, that sort of thing. And then there's arcanics, which are a combination of the two, human and animal hybrid. And then there are the old gods, which you just, for the most part, you just see kind of like faint whispers of on the horizon. Those are kind of the giant kaiju things. And then there are cats. Cats are their own specific group in this story, a very significant group, and a really interesting group. One of the main characters is a cat. Really interesting how they are used and how they fit into the story. Some of the groups are in power, some of the groups are not, and there's a lot to do with the hierarchy and classicism with how those groups interact. Slavery is another subject that is talked about. When we meet the main character, Micah Halfwolf, she's actually being sold as a slave. I mean, so that's something we just jump right into. From a story standpoint, we come in like right in the middle of something going on, and it's kind of, the story progresses forward, and it also does flashbacks to kind of give you an idea of how we got to this point. But we get to meet Micah, and you very she's get a sense that there's a lot of different pieces of her character, and she is a very strong lead character, but there's a lot going on. She is struggling with a lot. Again, the world, it is a post-war world, a world that's coming out of a trauma. She was in this war. She also suffered a significant trauma in the war. She's missing a limb. She's missing an arm. And she does not really have a full sense of, who she is, how she came to be where she is, or who she is. And so there's definitely an element, or one of the main elements is she's on a path of self-discovery. She has to figure out, who she is, and how she got, basically the abilities that she has. Slight spoilers, but the reason that she's an arcanic is that she has another creature living inside her, a demon, basically. Or at least it seems like that at the beginning. Definitely a separate consciousness of her own, or a separate being in her own. And they have a really interesting relationship, and that, I mean, in and of itself is one of the things that is explored in this story. One of the other main characters her name is Kippa. She is a little fox girl that Micah meets very early on in the story, and then basically kind of takes her along on her journey, looks out for her. But they're very interesting. There's a very interesting contrast between the two of them. Micah is very much like direct, coarse, I guess would be maybe a generous way to put it. And Kippa is like the very definition of an innocent in this world. And seeing the contrast, the point counterpoint between the two is really interesting to read and to see how they interact, how they interpret situations differently, and where where they help each other out. It's a really interesting relationship. Yeah, I mean this is a big world, and it is a big story. It is a deep story, and I guess the last thing I will say is I really think if you're curious, these trades or picking this up as a trade is the perfect way to do it. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot of worlds that you're going to see. There's a lot of characters that you're going to meet. It's a lot to keep track of, and it is just so carefully thought out by Marjorie Liu. Reading it in big chunks, I found to be really the best way to do it. I guess put it this way. So it came out about 5 years ago, and if this book came out once a month, we'd be at about issue number 60, but we're at issue number 30. And part of the reason for that is, again, just this artwork. You look at the detail, how dense the pages are. I mean, it's obvious that this is a labor of love for Sana Takeda, and for Marjorie Liu to the same extent. But it takes time. And so if there's any kind of gaps from one issue to the next, they are also so dense, it's hard to kind of keep everything in your mind, or keep it all fresh in your mind. And so sitting down and reading a big chunk at a time, like a trade, is perfect. I will also mention that at the back of most of these issues are something called, it's a lecture from Professor Tam Tam, who's one of the cats, lecturing these kittens about the world. And a lot of times it's a 1 or 2 page spread, if you will, but it's touching on small key points that maybe you saw a hint of in the story but wasn't really explained, or it's just a detail of the world that might come to be relevant, soon. And so as you're reading through there, those are in the trades as well, and you definitely want to read those in addition to just the pages of the story, because then you'll be much better informed down the road. And a lot of times something that you read about in one of Tam Tam's lectures is now relevant, 3, 4 issues later. But it's a beautiful story to look at. It's a really fun story and a really thoughtful story to read. And yeah, it's just one of the reasons. That's why it's my favorite, one of my favorites. And I just wanted to make a video to, kind of help get the word out. If you've heard about this book, if you're curious and you just weren't sure, definitely check it out. If you can, as I always say, head down, support your local comic book shop, pick up these trades. There's 5 of them now. That would get you up to the end of, the current issue number 30. And if you like what you read, then you can get on board for the next arc as this story continues. One of the greatest things with Image is that their first trades are usually $10, and that's the same case here. So, if you're at all curious after seeing this, you can head down to your local comic book shop, pick up the first trade for like $10, and see if you like it and see if you want to continue. So, yeah, thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you liked the video. Hopefully you head out and check out this book and like it. In the meantime, I'm going to go read some more comic books, and you should do that too. So, thanks again for watching. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the next one.